I often get asked how you get into X content. What content should I do before Inferno? What skills do I need to acquire for Tob? What bosses give you skills needed for other content? PVM, especially higher level PVM, is often touted as very difficult to get into. But with the right attitude, gear, and resources, learning PVM is usually just a matter of jumping in. This video is going to go over the various skills needed for different PVM, with my own personal arbitrary rating system for each category, as well as some non-raid bosses that can give you these skills. Before I get into anything, stats are far greater for DPS than anything gear can do for you 99% of the time. Each strength level is roughly a 1 to 2% DPS increase depending on if it gives you a max hit. Same with ranged and magic for powered staves. Not AFKing at Nightmare Zone until decent stats is griefing yourself and your teammates, when they are such simple stats to train up. As a quick extreme example, full Armadillo is typically a 0.5% DPS increase over Blessed D'hide at 80 mil for the set. Let's go over quickly what the main skills for PVM are. Different PVM requires different skills in varying capacities. I call these the three main pillars of PVM. These are not all-encompassing, but get the majority of the skills you can acquire. The first pillar I'm calling inventory management. This includes a variety of skills, switches, and eating being the main ones. Switching is the act of quickly changing your gear, typically during your weapon cooldown. An 8-way switch is very common in many places, as this includes swapping weapon into every gear slot. The fastest you can typically get this is 3 ticks for the entire switch, but sometimes you can get a switch off in 2 ticks. I've seen 1 tick 8 ways before. There are very few people that can pull that off. Inventory management also includes keeping track of food, prayer, and special attacks, both the meter and items. Next is movement. Properly placing your character is incredibly important in many places. Understanding the pathing of your character and how to avoid tile hazards matters almost everywhere. I also include managing the movement of monsters in this category. Last is prayer management. A lot of things fall into this. Ability to lazy flick or 1-tick flick is a small part of this, but also being able to off-tick and swap prayers to catch attacks of multiple enemies at once is a skill with a lot of depth. I'm going to go over each pillar and where some good places are to acquire skills from each. I'll be rating content later based on the depth of these skills required. Bosses that earn you decent GP, as well as skills, are incredibly good for training and bank building. For inventory management, the majority of the implementation is going to be in raids, chambers, and Tob. I'd highly recommend laying your switches out in a horizontal or vertical 2x2 pattern. Direction is mostly preference, and zigzagging your mouse to equip them. This makes your switches far faster and more accurate. There are a few other bosses where you'll be using switches. The really safe and easy ones are Calfight Queen, Dagannoth Kings, and Barrows to an extent. These have huge downtime for you to switch your gear, but are good to introduce the concept. The bosses that require quick switches are Zulrah, Grotesque Guardians, Nightmare, and Melee Nex. Zulrah is typically a great, safer introduction to getting a feel for switching quickly. Nightmare and Nex are much harder, but if you aren't able to quickly do the switches, it's not like the boss is going to kill you for it. One of the main areas that teaches you the other aspects of inventory management is Gauntlet. Gauntlet doesn't really require switches, but does require keeping careful track of food and prayer as well as where you keep them in the inventory. The content these bosses are preparing you for are chambers and Tob. Both are similar in that they require you to be able to switch very quickly. With Tob, this more depends on your role usually. Chambers has Muttadile, Vanguards, Vasa, and Olm, all requiring decent switches, with something like 4 Olm method being arguably the most demanding switches in the game. For Tob, you are often making reactionary switches in various rooms. Maiden, you are constantly changing gear if you are a mage, and in Nihilocus, the melee role also hybrids to magic constantly. Raids also requires careful supply management, even to the extent of dropping potions in good locations to allow you to equip or unequip items. Obviously, Inferno is the definition of supply management as well, although gear switches aren't a skill you'll be using there most likely. Movement has a ton of depth. Both our character and monsters' movements follow very strict algorithms. Our character moves by teleporting 2 tiles per tick, and can move in a square of directions each tick. The easiest place to learn exactly how this works is Hallowed Sepulchre. Mastering Floor 5 will give you a deep understanding of all forms of L running and diagonal movement, and the other floors allow you to learn this in a simpler and more progressive way. Learning how to Wookswalk Vorkath is also a surprisingly great foundation for many later encounters. Monster movement is even more complicated. Corner traps, southwest tile shenanigans, safe spots, etc. There's not a ton of places where you can easily learn how this works. I genuinely highly recommend Giant Mole and Dagannoth Kings for this. Mole is basically an Inferno melee. He even digs. Messing around with various safe spots around the lair gives you a very solid foundation for the Inferno melees. DKs fall more so under the prayer category, but messing with Dagannoth Rex safe spots can also help with gaining the skill. Movement is important in every single high-level PVM encounter: Gauntlet, Chambers, Tob, and especially Inferno. Of those, Inferno is the only one that requires a solid understanding of both your movement and monster movement. Dodging various floor attacks in Tob and Chambers, Olm cycles, as well as Sodatech mazes, all require a very solid understanding of movement. Prayer management is one of the flashiest skills to learn and is incredibly useful. Standard prayer flicking can be learned really anywhere. Very few places require it, only really Inferno and some weird challenges, like solo Tob. Dagannoth Kings are a solid place to learn one ticking as it extends your trip. Flicking prayers against multiple monsters is very punishing to learn properly, as doing something like flicking them backwards can often get you killed. I've never done that, surely not. I've said it a lot, but Dagannoth Kings again are great for learning this. Off-ticking Prime and Supreme and hopping between the caves is a great way to learn off-ticking before the Inferno. Now, Dagannoth Kings are unfortunately one of the more dangerous places to die, so you want to keep that in mind. God Wars is also great for learning this. Flicking the minions after killing the boss can save supplies, and is far less punishing should you mess it up. The Fight Caves is also a decent place to learn this safely. It makes sense that the baby Inferno would teach Inferno. In raids, flicking monsters is more of a general skill and not typically required. The main places this matters are Nilos, Waves and Boss, and Vanguards, although it is generally used throughout both raids in small ways. Gauntlet, Nightmare, and Nex are all more complicated encounters that use this skill as well. Obviously, the main place this is used by far is Inferno, requiring very solid flicking to conserve supplies, as well as various prayer cycles like 1-tick or 2-tick alternating to flick multiple mobs, and ability to off-tick. Now, there is a secret fourth pillar I'd like to mention. I'm not going to be rating bosses based on this. This pillar I call Rhythm. This encompasses an understanding of attack cycles and the tick system in general. Old school RuneScape is a rhythm game that plays at a beats per minute of 100, 0.6 seconds per beat. This matters at every single encounter, be it skilling or bossing. This is not a skill you can go to a specific place to learn. It's just a gradual thing you get a feel for. Even learning things like tick manip skilling methods can carry over to PVM. There are many places I've seen people say, oh, you just need to get a rhythm for that. Like Verzik tanking, Zarpa scythe walking, Olm cycles, even like 3-tick 4 granite. The only way to acquire this skill is by pushing yourself in various aspects of the game until you, quote, get a rhythm for it. I'm going to list the main encounters people work up to and give them a rating for the skill requirements in each category. A lot of people have different opinions on what content is harder than other content, but this should be a little less subjective and allow you to figure out what you need to work towards in order to get the skills you need. This is still very subjective, but these are the general difficulties to rate the tougher content at. Let's start with Nightmare. She's a step up from other bosses, but still fairly easy. I'm talking about Phasanis here, as that has basically replaced Nightmare. I'm going to give Nightmare a 3 out of 5 for inventory management. Keeping track of special attacks, supplies, and doing switches to kill parasites, husks, and totems is all fairly difficult. For movement, Nightmare gets a 2 out of 5. It's not ridiculously in-depth like some other content is, but you still need to avoid grasping claws and her melees often. Good movement for Sleepwalkers is also very important for catching them and not dying. Finally, prayer management for Nightmare, I'm giving a 4 out of 5. Nightmare requires flicking to the appropriate prayer each attack, as well as getting your prayers shuffled with their special attack. The melee prayer timing can be quite tight, and missing in any of these results in extremely high damage received. How about Nex? Nex is similar difficulty to Phasanis. I would say proper Nex in small groups is a bit tougher than Phasanis personally. For inventory management, Nex gets a 2 out of 5. This depends a lot on the method you used. For my preferred method with melee, you'll be doing quite a few switches. Keeping track of gear position as well as supply use and special attack is extremely important to surviving, as well as knowing whether you can do additional kills. But the switch is typically only a 4-way. For movement, Nex gets a 3 out of 5. It's a bit of a step up from Nightmare, I would say. If you've done Nex casually, you might be wondering why I'm giving her a higher score than Nightmare. This is because of middle resets, 5-tick walk-unders, and positioning in general being so much more important than Nightmare. You don't absolutely require perfect movement, but being able to use the text mentioned above will greatly improve kill consistency and speed. Finally, prayer management gets a 3 out of 5. This mainly comes into play on P5, where you are constantly keeping track of who Nex is on, and what prayer to use accordingly, melee or mage. For the most part, you can't mage prayer, so this is a step easier than Nightmare for me. Let's talk Gauntlet. This is also not quite at Raid's difficulty for the most part, but is a good step up from other boss encounters. For inventory management, it gets a 2 out of 5. There are really no switches required for Gauntlet, but keeping track of all the items you have during the prep, as well as your supply usage during the kill as well, is extremely important. For movement, Gauntlet gets a 5 out of 5. During the prep, movement doesn't exactly need to be perfect, but moving between skilling nodes and proper pathing does still matter. The movement gets ramped up in the fight itself, where you are avoiding tiles on the ground, various tornadoes, as well as not walking under Hunyef itself. Having a solid understanding of all the ways you can path will help you avoid the flurry of attacks. Prayer management gets a 3 out of 5. This is mostly just counting Hunyef's attacks and then switching prayer, and turning prayer back on when he turns them off. Although with everything going on, this can be kind of hard to keep track of. Let's move on to raids, starting with chambers. This is all versions, solo, team, challenge mode, whatever you want. For inventory management, chambers is easily a 5 out of 5. Especially in CMs, keeping gear and supplies in good locations is extremely important, as well as being able to do switches effectively. If you lose your inventory mid-run, you may as well have lost the raid. Movement-wise, Chambers gets a 4 out of 5. Olm requires quite a bit of solid movement, especially if soloing. Avoiding special attacks and keeping the head turning always involves a lot of proper movement. Movement is also really involved in almost all the standard rooms as well. Tekton, Vasa, Vespula, Shamans, Ice Demon. Mystics are unique in that you can safe spot them, one of the few places corner trapping matters. Prayer management gets a 3 out of 5. Vespula requires very careful prayers with redemption. Other than her, Olm is the only real difficulty with prayer orbs and alternating attacks. Most of this skill is wasting less prayer and conserving, so you can use fewer potions, as well as keeping prayer low for prayer orbs. Theater's inventory management is a 4 out of 5. Knowing exactly where your items are is very important in Tob, especially on something like Nilo Boss or freezing at Maiden. And switching and managing food or supplies on the ground is a big part of Tob. For movement, Tob is an easy 5 out of 5. It requires exact placement of your character in the majority of rooms. Maiden for dodging blood, Bloat for dodging flies, Nilo for efficiently hitting mobs, Sodatseg has mazes, Zarp is scythe walking, and every phase of Verzik all involve incredibly high amounts of movement tech. Prayer management is a 3 out of 5. Your prayers restored every room, so managing prayer flicking doesn't really matter. Proper prayer usage is very important in Nilo room, Sodatseg, and Verzik P3, but outside of those, it is typically just camp the same prayer for the most part. Inferno is considered the hardest content in the game for most. Inventory management gets a 4 out of 5. Supply usage is extremely paramount in Inferno, but outside of that, you don't really do much in the way of switches unless you are doing ridiculously fast speedies. Movement, again, Inferno is a 5 out of 5, just like Tob. Where you stand dictates what you can get hit by and is extremely important. Pillar rotation, pillar stacks, and Zuck healers require a good amount of control over your movement. Inferno is also one of the few pieces of content where understanding monster movement is also extremely important. Corner trapping, safe spotting, etc. Prayer management for Inferno, of course, is a 5 out of 5. You are limited to how many prayer potions you can bring, and therefore need to prayer flick often to conserve them. You also need an understanding of off-ticking and various prayer techniques like 1-tick and 2-tick alternating. Okay, you think you've got the skills and gear required to start doing harder PVM? How do you go about finding teammates for the team content? This is something I'm still working on personally. It's a skill in and of itself, but there's a lot of ways to go about it. Most pieces of content would have an FFA world. Tob has World 416, and Next has World 420, but these are the definition of a mixed bag. We Do Raids Discord or other similar Discords are a great way to get paired up with teammates with actual voice comms, which are absolutely massive in learning raids. Again, these can be a mixed bag. The best way to find teammates is joining a decent PVM clan or community with people willing to take learners. Finding these takes some asking around and research. When coming to better players asking to raid, I found the biggest thing for them is a willingness to learn and a good attitude. The people with hundreds of KC and content typically know what they're doing and know how to help you improve as well. So make sure you let them. We all want more good players to raid with. The most important thing is to ask people. You can't go with them if you don't ask. If you're catching this video around when it goes up, I will be streaming on my Twitch page.
Oh, I'm looking
I'll be alternating max efficient Dagannoth Kings and Inferno speedruns, depending on the tasks I get. So come check it out. And that's about it for the video. Leave a like if you liked it, and or subscribe. Thanks, guys.